The story begins with a soft hues of orange and purple streaked across the sky, painting a picture of tranquility. A low growl rumbled from behind the massive stone formation ahead of him. A dragon. A boy stood at the edge of the corner, his heart pounding in his chest. A boy gripped his sword tightly, the cool steel familiar in his hands. The boy took his chance. He summoned the power within him, leaping into the air just as the dragon reached its peak. His feet left the ground with unnatural speed, the wind whipping through his hair as he shot up toward the beast. In the blink of an eye, Ethan's sword came down again, striking true with one final, decisive blow. The sword pierced the dragon's body. Game clear, the words appeared across the screen in bold, triumphant letters as Rei Arimura's fingers hovered above the keyboard. Piece of cake, Rei muttered to himself, a confident grin crossing his face as he pressed the final key combination. With a confident chuckle, he added, "There's no game in existence that I can't clear. Not a single one in this world." He paused for a moment, tapping his chin thoughtfully. What game should I try next? His eyes flicked to the game recommendations on the screen, and then he stopped. He clicked on a curious title that caught his eye. The Chicken of King game? He clicked the download button and leaned back, waiting for it to load. As soon as the game started, a flood of nostalgia hit him. Whoa, this brings back memories. Its official name is Chicken of King. It's a game where a victory royale game where the last one standing wins. A typical battle royale game packed with abundant items and level-up mechanics. It once took the world by storm. However, it's now considered a dead game. A grin slowly spread across his face as the old interface appeared. He couldn't help but remember his past glory. I was ranked number 1 in the world for this game. He put his hands on the mouse of the computer together in anticipation, a familiar excitement creeping up on him. It's been a while, let's give it a go. Suddenly, the screen flickered, and the words Chicken of King appeared in bold letters. Rei froze, his fingers hovering above the keyboard. But before he could react, a violent flash of lightning struck the screen, causing it to flicker wildly. Rei's eyes widened as the room plunged into darkness for a split second, and the computer screen seemed to pulse with an eerie, unnatural energy. His muscles tensed, his breath catching in his throat as the sensation felt real. Too real. His heart raced as the world around him distorted, the air thick with static. "I'm dying," Rei gasped, unable to move, feeling the electric pulse run through his veins. Rei collapsed to the floor, his vision spinning. His thoughts were a blur, the shock still buzzing through his body. 30 years old, unemployed, still a virgin. Is this how I die? Rei thought bitterly, his mind flashing back to the years of pain he had tried so desperately to forget, the moments from his childhood when the taunts and jeers of his classmates echoed in his mind, each word another weight added to his self-worth. The bullies, the constant reminders that he didn't fit in, that he wasn't like everyone else. He was different, strange. Suddenly, amid the chaos of his thoughts, a voice interrupted. "Stop it right there." A woman appeared in his memory, standing in the midst of the flashback. The memories of his childhood bullies, those cruel voices, shifted and flickered in his mind as he watched the woman. Who's that? Is this what they call your life flashing before your eyes? He wondered, his mind caught between the present and the painful echoes of his past. Rei's body trembled as the lingering effects of the lightning coursed through him. He blinked rapidly, and when his eyes finally cleared, he found himself lying on soft grass. Where is this? Rei thought, his voice a soft whisper, a mixture of awe and confusion. His heart raced as he tried to make sense of the situation. His gaze shifted, and there, in the distance, he spotted a gazebo nestled among the trees. An elderly woman sat gracefully inside it, sipping tea from a porcelain cup. Rei stood there, still trying to process everything. Is this heaven? Rei finally asked, his voice trembling slightly as he stepped closer to the gazebo, unsure of what else to say. He let out a small laugh, his voice shaky. "'Cause it doesn't really seem like hell," he muttered to himself, as though trying to convince himself of the absurdity of the situation. She took another slow sip of her tea before responding, her voice gentle but carrying a weight of knowing. "I will give a chance to someone as miserable as you," she said, her eyes meeting Rei's with an expression that was both kind and knowing. Rei blinked, his mind struggling to process her words. "What?" He stared at her, his confusion deepening. The old woman's voice was soft yet filled with a sense of finality. "I wish you a safe journey," she said, her gaze steady and warm, her expression still one of quiet understanding. Just as Rei began to take a step away from the gazebo, the old woman raised her hand, and with a swift snap of her fingers, everything around him shifted. Rei felt his body jerk as if the ground beneath him had vanished. Suddenly, he was falling. No, he wasn't falling. He was soaring, plunging through a vast, infinite space that stretched out endlessly before him. His mind spun as he tried to make sense of the impossible sight before him. Rei's eyes snapped open, his breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. He was no longer soaring through the cosmos. Instead, he found himself standing in a sterile, futuristic room, the walls lined with sleek panels that emitted a soft blue glow. But something was off. In front of him, a series of blue screens materialized, each floating in midair like some kind of digital interface. Rei gasped, his breath stolen by the sudden fall. He crumpled to the floor, his limbs shaking as he lay there, disoriented and in pain. His chest tightened as his mind struggled to catch up with the sudden shift in reality. Suddenly, a new blue screen appeared before him, larger than the others, flashing with words that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "Welcome to the world of Chicken of King." Rei's heart skipped a beat. His eyes locked onto the words, his mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of the situation. Rei's breath caught in his throat. He had thought the game was a thing of the past, a relic of his glory days. Just as Rei began to take in the bizarre world around him, another blue screen flashed in front of him, further confirming the reality, or lack thereof, that he had found himself in. "Please select a difficulty level. This is seriously the world of CK." Rei shouted, his voice rising in disbelief. "Players who reincarnate will receive rewards for clearing based on the difficulty chosen." The words flashed brightly on the screen, each letter emphasizing the gravity of what Rei had just stepped into. Rei stared at the fading screen, his mind racing as he processed the last message. "Rewards for clearing," he muttered to himself, the weight of the words sinking in. "Easy. No rewards for clearing. As penalty, your lifespan will be reduced by 10 years. The blue screen flashed again, this time presenting a different set of words. "Normal. No rewards for clearing, no penalties either." Rei's eyes widened as the blue screen flickered again, presenting a new set of options that made his heart race. "Hard. Rewards for clearing. You can restart your life from __ years old." The blue screen flickered once again, and Rei's heart skipped a beat as he read the words that appeared. They were unlike anything he had seen before. "Nightmare. Rewards for clearing. Any wish will be granted." Rei's mind went blank for a moment as the gravity of the message sank in. Any wish will be granted? As Rei stood there, the world around him growing darker, the pressure of his decision weighing heavily on him, money, girls. The fantasies came quickly. He imagined himself rich, surrounded by piles of cash, living in luxury, never needing to work a day in his life again. Women fawned over him, admiring his newfound wealth and success. He imagined a life where he had everything he wanted. "If it's me, the world ranking #1, this will be a piece of cake." Rei smirked, his lips curling upward as the old, familiar arrogance returned. The screen before him flickered again, as if acknowledging his confidence. "Start the game on this mode." Rei stared at the words, his finger hovering over the option. His confidence had remained strong. If anything, it had only grown stronger. He selected yes without hesitation. Nightmare mode selected. Suddenly, the blue screen appeared again, this time more foreboding than ever. "Due to special settings, all stats set to 1. Level up disabled permanently." Rei froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. His mind immediately started racing. Rei looked up at the screen, his confusion quickly turning into frustration. "Huh? What did you say?" "Level up disabled." The blue screen flickered once again, its glow harsh and unrelenting in the nightmarish world around him. "Unlucky skill. Bad luck has been granted." As Rei stood there, wait a second. He felt a sudden, strange warmth radiating from his hands, and to his shock, a faint glow began to spread from his palms, running up his arms and through the rest of his body. Character creation complete. Rei glanced down at his hands again, and then let out a bitter laugh. Isn't this just a mob character who dies early in the game? A monstrous figure emerged from the darkness, its hulking form casting a long shadow over Rei. Tutorial will now begin. The monster growled again, taking another step toward him, the tension thick in the air. Its dark eyes locked on Rei, and Rei's body tensed, unsure of how to proceed. Rei blinked, his gaze shifting between the monster and the screen. "Already," he muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with annoyance. The monstrous figure let out a deafening roar, its massive claws swiping toward Rei with terrifying speed. Rei barely had time to react before the creature lunged at him, the ground shaking beneath its weight. My body feels heavy, Rei muttered through gritted teeth, stumbling backward. Is it because my stats are low? Rei asked himself, the answer already obvious, but no less frustrating. His strength, agility, and everything else were reduced to their base values. Practically nothing. With no way to boost them, his body was sluggish, uncoordinated, and far weaker than it should have been. Rei's eyes widened in shock. A sword. His mind raced. A monster wielding a weapon? This was no ordinary beast. The creature raised the sword high above its head, readying for another devastating blow. He tried to dodge, but the blade nicked his side, cutting through his clothes and leaving a deep gash in his skin. The screen pulsed as numbers began to appear, rapidly ticking and shifting on the interface. The beast, standing triumphantly over Rei's vanished form, let out a low, guttural growl, its eyes gleaming with a mixture of malice and satisfaction. Rei's eyes fluttered open as he found himself once again lying on the soft, green grass of the beautiful garden. This place, Rei muttered under his breath, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. So if I die, I'll respawn here. That's how it's set up, huh? Rei thought, his mind racing. An infinite loop, then? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. But with my current level, Rei's thoughts trailed off. He had nothing. No stats, no abilities. First, I need to figure out how to clear the tutorial. Rei's mind sharpened with determination. As Rei sat there, lost in thought, a sudden circle loop appeared in front of him, glowing faintly with a blue light. The purpose of the tutorial is to teach the controls. Rei stared at the loop, his eyes narrowing in irritation. I should be able to take down the enemies so easily, Rei muttered to himself, a determined look crossing his face. He might be stuck in this cycle, with his low stats and no chance to level up. Wait, why the hell am I struggling with the tutorial? He asked himself in disbelief, his voice almost a growl. His hands were shaking from the exertion, and he felt his heart racing in his chest. I was the #1 player in the world rankings, Rei muttered, almost as if to remind himself. His thoughts were sharpening with focus, the frustration of the past few moments fading away. Chicken of King is played on a massive field divided into several areas, with each area hosting mission games. Rei's voice was calm now, his confidence returning. He remembered the mechanics of the game. The game wasn't just about combat, it was about strategy, teamwork, and surviving the various challenges each area presented. I never lost in any game. I was invincible, Rei thought to himself, his voice quiet but filled with conviction. The words echoed in his mind, like a mantra. Invincible. That's what he had been, wasn't it? The top player, unbeaten by anyone. He had crushed every challenge, every opponent. No mission, no quest, no boss could stand in his way. But now, in this strange world, things were different. His body was weak, his stats at rock bottom. Now, let the tutorial begin. Rei's eyes widened, his muscles tensing instinctively. He'd barely had a moment to catch his breath before the massive beast reappeared, its glowing red eyes fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. I haven't even managed to start the game. Rei shouted in frustration, his voice echoing through the air. His grip slipping as the weight of his fatigue caught up to him. But even as the monster advanced, ready to finish him off, Rei's mind sharpened the tutorial. I'll just clear it quickly, Rei's weapon thrust through the air, aiming straight for the beast's chest. But just as his strike was about to land, the creature moved with an unexpected speed, sidestepping Rei's attack with a fluid motion. The beast's glowing red eyes narrowed as it effortlessly dodged, its large form shifting away from Rei's attack like it had anticipated the move. Rei felt a sharp, searing pain as the beast's massive claws slashed across his body. When Rei opened his eyes again, he found himself lying on the soft grass in the same garden, not being able to clear even the tutorial. The old woman's voice cut through the silence, a sharp tone that stung Rei's ears. And you're still the former #1 ranked player in the whole world, she continued, her voice thick with annoyance. Shut up, he snapped, his voice full of anger. It's an impossible game to begin with. Impossible game. The old woman's voice was calm, almost amused. She gazed at Rei with a knowing look. But nothing about the game has changed, right? Rei blinked and looked down, watching as a circle loop appeared at his feet. It was the same loop that had appeared before, the one signaling the start of another trial, another loop of the tutorial. The old woman, her expression unreadable, snapped her fingers once again. "Give me more entertainment," she said, her voice carrying a cold edge that sent a shiver down Rei's spine. Rei's eyes widened, and before he could react, he felt the ground beneath him give way. The loop at his feet spun violently, faster than before. When his vision cleared, he looked up to find himself back in the same tutorial area. Rei, still staring at the looming beast in front of him, felt his mind shift as he processed the old woman's words. "The game itself hasn't changed," she had said. "Which means, CK has been trending lately," he muttered to himself, his voice low but sharp with realization. "Maybe I should look it up," Rei thought. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden flash of light. In the corner of his vision, a holographic screen materialized, just like the ones that had appeared when he first entered this strange world. "Found it," Rei exclaimed, his eyes widening in realization. His heart raced as the words appeared before him. Web manual. Rei's mind raced as he processed the information. The more he thought about it, the clearer the solution became. His confidence surged. "So as long as I reach the time limit, I'll clear it," Rei thought to himself, his heart pounding with excitement. "I don't need to force myself to defeat it. Don't underestimate the number 1 ranked player, dumbass," Rei shouted aloud, his voice filled with newfound determination. With that, Rei pushed off from the ground, darting toward the monster. But this time, his movements were different. He wasn't trying to fight it. He was trying to evade it, drawing the monster into a dance of avoidance. "If I don't handle this properly here, Rei muttered to himself, his voice trailing off. His heart tightened as his thoughts wandered back to a time long ago, to moments in his past that were hard to forget, that he remembered how they would laugh at him, mock him for being the odd one out. "This is my first and final chance." Rei's thoughts raced, each word fueling his determination. "I'll definitely make it happen." The countdown read, 25 seconds. Rei glanced at the clock, his mind completely fixated on it. He had to survive for just a little longer. The beast's attacks were growing more erratic, and with every dodge, he could feel his own body growing fatigued. But he couldn't afford to give up. The beast, now enraged beyond reason, that was close. Rei thought, his eyes wide as he sidestepped with barely a second to spare. "1 hit, and I'll die with the stats I have. Time remaining, 10 seconds. Rei's eyes locked on the timer as it steadily counted down. He could feel the pressure closing in, but his mind remained sharp. "All right, just like this, just like this," he whispered under his breath, repeating the mantra over and over in his mind. Rei's feet suddenly began to glow, and he froze, his confusion mounting as he looked down at his glowing limbs. Before he could even process what was happening, a blue screen flickered in front of him. Bad luck activated. Before he could react, the sound of something rapidly approaching filled the air. Looking up in sheer panic, Rei saw a massive stone falling from the sky, rocketing down toward him. His eyes widened in horror as the stone grew larger with every passing second, and the ground beneath him seemed to tremble. But his body felt paralyzed, as if every instinct was telling him he couldn't escape this. The stone was falling too fast. Rei had no time to react. The stone was about to crush him. Just as Rei thought he might finally catch his breath, the ground beneath him trembled again. He turned quickly, eyes narrowing in instinctive dread, and saw the beast charging at him once more. Its massive form loomed, its claws extended, and its mouth opened in a roar. The creature lunged at him with ferocity, its swordless claws aimed at his chest. Rei barely had time to react as he stumbled backward. With his side still stinging from the beast's claws and the weight of bad luck hanging over him like a shadow, Rei forced himself to run. Rei barely had time to register the danger before the beast's sword swung toward him with terrifying speed. The blade whistled through the air, a deadly arc aimed directly for his head. The blue screen flickered in front of him once again, blocking his vision for a moment. Tutorial complete. For a split second, Rei froze, his eyes widening in shock. The beast's sword, which had been mere inches from Rei's head, suddenly slipped from its grasp. The massive weapon clattered to the ground, its metallic thud echoing through the air. Within seconds, the beast was gone, leaving only the broken sword behind. "I'm saved. Opponents that don't think like players are harder to predict." He muttered the thought aloud, his voice low as he laid down to the floor. The realization had hit him during the battle with the beast. "Well, I guess that should do it," the old woman muttered. "Now then." The old woman snapped her fingers again, and from her point of view, Rei's figure was once again swallowed by the shifting vortex of the game world. "What now?" Rei shouted, his voice breaking the stillness of the area. The sudden shift, the mysterious loops, the endless challenges, it was all starting to feel like a cruel game. He could feel the rush of air as his body plummeted through the sky, the ground rapidly approaching, and the only thing he could do was shout in frustration. "You've got to be kidding me." His voice echoed through the air, his panic rising with every passing second. The earth below seemed to get closer with each passing second, and the overwhelming sense of dread gripped him. But then, just as he braced for impact, something miraculous happened. Without warning, a parachute appeared, materializing from nowhere and attaching itself to Rei's back. He gasped as the harness tightened around him, and the parachute billowed open, instantly slowing his descent. The parachute floated gracefully, guiding him away from the looming danger of the ground. As he continued to fall, his thoughts raced. Just like in the game's opening sequence. "Huh," Rei muttered under his breath, the words escaping with a mix of frustration and resignation. Rei stood in the middle of a bustling town area, the vibrant sights and sounds of the world around him almost overwhelming. "Finally," he muttered to himself, his fists clenched in determination. "Wait." He looked down at his hands, his heart sinking. His stats were still so low, and his skills felt weak. "Looks like I won't be able to survive without rare items." Rei's voice was filled with frustration and a hint of fear. Rei stopped in his tracks, the town's atmosphere fading as the familiar blue screen flickered to life in front of him. His eyes widened in surprise as a new notification popped up. "Mission, ogre." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that Rei could feel in his chest. The screen floated in midair, casting a faint glow that illuminated his surroundings. Rei glanced up at the now familiar blue screen hovering before him, the countdown ticking away steadily. "Mission starts in 3 minutes. Basically, it's like a game of tag with no rules," he mused, a dry chuckle escaping his lips. "If the bite catches and kills you, it's game over," but Rei's heart skipped a beat. His breath caught in his throat as he continued reading. "You can also turn the tables and defeat it instead." A rush of adrenaline surged through him. He wasn't just supposed to run. He was supposed to defeat it. If you manage to take it down, you'll level up. He wasn't entirely sure what that meant, but it sounded important. And gain significant advantages in many ways moving forward. The weight of the words settled over him. "I won't level up," he thought, the faintest smile tugging at his lips despite the exhaustion. "But I'm aiming for the rare items that come out as the reward." Rei's heart skipped a beat as the new notification appeared before him, its stark white text flashing urgently across the blue screen. "Ogre start. Time limit. 10 minutes." Before he could even react, the ground trembled beneath his feet. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the town area. His instincts kicked in immediately as he scanned the area, his hand gripping his spear tightly. "Huh," he thought, eyes widening in shock. The beasts lumbered toward him, their heavy footsteps shaking the earth. Each one was just as big, just as fearsome as the first one he'd faced, and there was no doubt in Rei's mind now that the game had just escalated in a way he hadn't prepared for. "It's starting just like that," Rei thought, panic surging through him for a brief moment. He hadn't even had time to properly prepare for the onslaught. His mind raced as he thought of a plan. Rei pressed himself flat against the side of a large trash can, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. His heart pounded in his chest as the deep, thunderous footsteps of the ogres grew louder, closer. "This is bad," Rei thought, his mind racing. "Is it already over for me?" He couldn't believe it. The mission, the rare items, the victory, it all seemed so close. Rei froze, his body tensing as the voice cut through the chaos of the moment. "What are you doing?" Rei's eyes widened in disbelief as he realized that this wasn't just some random bystander. "Huh, you are," he muttered, his brain scrambling to make sense of the situation. Her voice was casual, almost amused as she replied, The loud, booming voice echoed through the alley, rattling the very air around them. "We've got to run." The urgency in the voice was unmistakable, and Rei's instincts screamed at him to act. "Quickly," she snapped, her grip firm as she tugged him along. Rei barely had time to process what was happening before the woman pulled him into motion. His feet stumbled, his mind still whirling from the sudden change in the situation, but he didn't resist. His heart pounded as the feeling of danger intensified. The ogres, still struggling with the barrier she had erected, were now pushing against it with more force, their roars growing louder. Rei leaned against the cold, damp wall of the underground passage, catching his breath. Did it leave? Rei asked, his voice hoarse, eyes scanning the shadows for any signs of movement. You sure know your way around here with these shortcuts. Rei raised an eyebrow when he saw a box. To his curiosity, he approached the box. When he opened the box, he was greeted by a pair of sleek shoes, black, with intricate patterns etched into them. Skywalk, huh? Skywalk. These shoes let you temporarily jump high into the air. Rei didn't hesitate here. Take this. He handed her shoes. The woman looked surprised for a moment, clearly not expecting this. Huh, really? Without warning, she suddenly closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. Thank you, she said, her voice sincere. Time remaining, 5 minutes. The countdown ticking down was a constant reminder of the looming threat. The sudden voice rang out again, piercing through the tense silence that had settled in the underground passage. Out of nowhere, another woman appeared at the entrance to the passage, her movements fluid and precise as she engaged with the ogres. She was dressed in a striking red outfit, her long black hair flowing behind her like a dark river, whipping through the air with every swing of her weapon. In her hand, she held a gleaming, shining ring that sparkled with an otherworldly light, almost as if it were alive. The ogres had seemingly caught sight of her, their massive forms lumbering toward her with mindless aggression. But she wasn't backing down. Her sword flashed with deadly precision as she parried and struck, cutting through the air with grace and strength. Pfft, weakling, she muttered under her breath, her voice dripping with condescension. Rei's eyes widened in disbelief as the woman in red, having finished off the last of the ogres with a swift and decisive strike. The woman in red vanished. Who is that person? The woman finally asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. Ah, yeah, kinda, Rei replied, his words slow as he thought about how to explain it. What? Just because you're weak. The woman muttered under her breath, but before Rei could process his words, the ground trembled beneath them. The ogres began to appear, their hulking shapes emerging from the shadows. The creatures were now back in full force, lumbering toward them with deadly intent. Rei felt a wave of doubt wash over him. The ogres were right behind them, and he could hear the sound of their massive feet pounding against the ground. His breath was shallow, his legs burning from the sprint, and it was becoming clear that they wouldn't make it much longer. Rei and the woman stood frozen at the dead end of the alley, their backs pressed against the cold, unyielding wall. Rei's heart pounded in his chest, and for a moment he could only stare at the approaching ogres, the fear settling in like a heavy weight. The ogres' eyes glowed an ominous shade of red, their monstrous figures now clearly visible as they stalked toward them. What do I do now? Rei muttered, barely able to form a coherent thought as panic began to claw at him. His mind raced for solutions, but nothing came to him. He turned to look at the woman, hoping for some kind of reassurance, but she too appeared speechless. Her eyes were sharp, scanning their surroundings, her jaw tight with frustration. She was clearly trying to think of something, anything, to get them out of this mess. But then, a soft voice broke through the tension. It's okay, Rei said, his voice shaky but trying to sound more confident than he felt. I'll figure something out. Rei swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. The woman glanced at him, her expression unreadable. As Rei and the woman sprinted towards the open street, his thoughts raced. Even though this is a life-or-death situation, I'll protect her, he thought, determined not to let the ogres take them both down. But just as they were about to cross the final stretch, something unexpected happened. Without warning, the woman suddenly pushed Rei and shoved him hard to the ground. Rei gasped in shock, his mind scrambling to make sense of it. Sorry, the woman said, her voice sounding strangely distant, as if she were apologizing for something minor. But before Rei could even react, she sprang into action. With one swift motion, she strapped on the skywalk shoes Rei had given her earlier, and in an instant, she was lifted off the ground. The woman soared higher into the air, her figure growing smaller as she ascended. Bye-bye, she shouted cheerfully, waving at Rei from above, a wide grin on her face. Huh, Rei muttered, still lying on the ground in a stunned daze. What? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, the disbelief still sinking in. The ogres were still charging toward him, and Rei's instincts kicked in again. But his heart wasn't in it anymore. No way, the thought stung more than he cared to admit. Oh right, he muttered, shaking off the grogginess. I'll be revived. His mind was still catching up to the sudden transition, but it wasn't hard to remember the rules of the game. I've already cleared the tutorial. So where did I respawn this time? An old woman appeared raising her one hand, and with a swift motion, she threw a book toward Rei. He caught it just in time, almost dropping it due to its weight. Whoa, that was close, he said, steadying himself. What's this? Rei muttered, looking down at the book in his hands. The cover read, Manual for Revived Players. Rei didn't waste any time and opened the book. His eyes quickly scanned the first few lines. When a player dies, they return to purgatory. This place must be the purgatory. He continued reading, growing more intrigued by what he saw. The next passage caught his attention. The player can respawn at any time up to 1 hour before their moment of death. What? Rei exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. You can respawn at a specific time? His mind raced as the implications of this sank in. Which means, Rei's voice trailed off as his options expanded before him. I can either start while running away from the ogres, or I can go back to the very beginning. As Rei fell through the familiar loop once again, the world around him seemed to stretch and twist in a disorienting spiral. What? I haven't set the time yet. Rei shouted, panic creeping into his voice. His body spun in midair as the loop pulled him further down, forcing him to relive the experience. Please set the respawn time, came the same voice from earlier, echoing around him in the loop. It was calm, almost mechanical, like an automated system. Okay then, he muttered, gritting his teeth. He closed his eyes, focusing on the moment he wanted to return to. His mind locked onto the scene, back at the trash can when he had first hidden from the ogres. Oh, Rei exclaimed, his face lighting up with excitement. He'd returned to this exact moment, with the knowledge of what would happen next. Time-specific respawns are kind of OP, aren't they? What are you doing? The woman asked, appearing once again with that same knowing smile on her face. Getting to see this view every time might not be so bad. Rei muttered to himself, though there was no joy in his voice. Just as his thoughts were settling, a loud, booming voice echoed across the streets, sending a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. TSK. Gotta run, the woman muttered, grabbing Rei's hand in an attempt to pull him along. But Rei quickly wrenched his hand free, his expression hardening as he looked at her. Sorry, little devil girl, he said with a teasing smirk. Let's meet again somewhere. He gave her a thumbs up before closing the trash can. The woman stood there, utterly speechless, her face flashing between surprise and frustration. For a moment, the alleyway fell silent. Then the ogres spotted her. A roar echoed through the streets as the giant creatures locked eyes on the woman. She cursed under her breath. Damn it, she shouted, her voice sharp with panic. What's with that guy? She shouted, still incredulous, as she sprinted to avoid the ogre's deadly pursuit. Rei crouched behind the trash can, his heart still racing from the chaos unfolding around him. But there was one girl who had always stood out to him. She was different. She had always been there when he needed someone the most, without him even asking. The woman's face, the one who had betrayed him earlier, flashed in his mind. The way she had stood tall, confident, and almost uncaring. It reminded him of someone from his past. It was his first love. How long are you going to keep chasing me? She shouted, her voice hoarse. She couldn't run any longer. She had pushed herself to the limit, but the ogres were relentless. With a strangled gasp, the woman fell to her knees. Her body gave out, her strength completely drained. I can't go on anymore, she muttered, her voice almost a whisper. The ogres, sensing her weakness, closed in. One of them raised its massive sword high, the blade glinting in the dim light, preparing to strike down the woman. But just as the sword was about to fall, the woman felt a sudden, unexpected force behind her, a strong pair of arms wrapping around her waist. Before she could react, she was lifted off the ground, her feet dangling in the air. She looked up to see a familiar face. Rei. He was the one who had pulled her from certain death. Rei's eyes narrowed as he descended, his feet touching the ground with a soft thud. This is the only time I'll be helping you. He glanced over his shoulder, seeing the woman still watching him from a distance. See you, Rei muttered, his voice low and final as he turned and pushed off the ground with his skywalk shoes. The wind rushed past him as he soared higher again, the city unfolding beneath him. But suddenly, something whistled through the air, a dart, speeding toward him with deadly precision. Rei's eyes widened, and his reflexes kicked in. Whoa, he shouted, twisting midair to dodge the incoming projectile. The dart passed by him with barely an inch to spare, its tip glinting dangerously in the sunlight. Rei's expression shifted instantly from surprise to fury. He kicked his feet and descended back toward the ground, his mind already calculating his next move. Whoever had thrown that dart was not someone he could ignore. Landing with a solid thud, Rei's skywalk shoes deactivated, and he swiftly turned to face the source of the attack. His eyes locked onto a figure standing just a few yards away, another player. This one was tall and lean, dressed in a dark, tactical outfit, with a series of darts strapped to their waist and a sharp, focused expression. Suddenly targeting others like that is just bad manners, Rei said with a playful smirk, his tone light but his body tensed and ready for whatever came next. The man's jaw tightened, clearly angered by Rei's calm demeanor in the face of danger. "You're all fired up, huh?" Rei taunted, his stance relaxed as he watched the man carefully. "This is bad," Rei muttered, realizing that his situation was about to escalate. He had no choice but to keep his distance and fast. Before he could escape, the dart-throwing man suddenly appeared in front of him, blocking his path with frightening speed. "Damn it!" Rei cursed under his breath. "Take this." The woman's voice rang out, and Rei's heart skipped a beat. The woman he had saved before, the one who had betrayed him, was now in front of him, launching something toward the dart-throwing man. As the woman's knife hurtled through the air toward the dart-throwing man, Rei's reflexes kicked in. With a swift, calculated movement, he reached out, his hand closing around the blade mid-flight. His fingers wrapped around the handle just before it would have struck the man, and he held it with a firm grip, the cold metal pressed against his palm. Without warning, the dart-throwing man surged forward, aiming to throw another dart at Rei. But Rei was already one step ahead. In a single fluid motion, he tossed the knife in his hand like a dart himself, sending it spiraling toward the man. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment, like and subscribe for more content like this. Till next time.